Good afternoon. Welcome to How to Engage with Europe Digitally, an event organized by Studio Europa Maastricht as part of the 19th European Week of Regions and Cities. Studio Europa Maastricht is a center of expertise for debate and dialogue and research on European affairs. And in the next hour, we'll be discussing lessons learned and opportunities to be seized after more than a year of pandemic-related restrictions and experimenting with online and hybrid events formats. My name is Job Zomerplaag, and I'm a program editor at Studio Europa and your host today. Today, I'll be looking back and forward with 4 guests who all bring different experiences and expertise to this wonderful table here in Brussels. And we'll also engage with you today, you as audience, and we would like to include you in this conversation too. What have been your lessons learned? Which opportunities to be seized do you see? We would love to hear it, so please share it with us. As you see already on the Slido in a bit. Let me first introduce you to our speakers that have joined us today. Let me start with Giuseppe Porcaro. Hi, Giuseppe.
Hi, Job. It's a pleasure to be here.
Amazing to see you here. Thank you for being here. Giuseppe, you lead the outreach activities of Bruegel, the European think tank specializing in economics. And your responsibilities include communications, media, events, and publications, as well as membership relations and the related support to the governance of this organization. You have been at Bruegel since 2014, and until December 2019, you served as the head of communications and events. And you're currently Bruegel's head of outreach and governance. Giuseppe, may I ask you, what makes a successful online event?
A good conversation.
Well, that sounds very promising. I hope to have that with you today. And then I would like to turn to Angel Bermlewski, who is a senior specialist in communication. For the past 7 months, Angel has been a member at the Common Secretariat of the Conference on the Future of Europe. And previously, you have been working for the DG Regio, dealing with the administrative capacity and cohesion policy in Bulgaria, Croatia, Hungary, Romania, and Slovenia, quite some countries. And before that, you worked for 6 years as a press and communication officer at the representation of the European Commission in Rome. Hi, Angel.
Hi, Job.
What makes a successful online event for you?
Well, for the audience, certainly some special effects. For the speakers, a nice and safe background, and also never look in your expression on the screen because you have to look at the camera.
That's a lot of tips, and I noted them down. Thank you very much, Angel. Great to have you here. Beatriz. Hi, Beatriz.
Hello.
Great to have you here. Beatriz, you are a Brussels-based freelance reporter, mainly reporting on European events happening here and European affairs. You're a broadcast journalist and also an events moderator. You're currently covering the EU for the Luxembourg Times, the Telemadrid and El Economista, and you're also a regular contributor to the international media outlets. We'll talk about that in a bit, hopefully. Beatriz, you have an extensive experience also in moderating events on EU affairs, such as the EU Green Week. But you also have moderated an event for Studio Europa Maastricht a while ago, which was called Workplace Europe Mind the Gap. And we might be talking about that later too. What makes for you a successful online event?
I think a good targeted audience, being as engaging as possible, and having very interesting speakers.
Amazing. Well, that's also an assignment to you guys watching at home. Please engage with this discussion, and there are ample opportunities to do so. Thank you so much, Beatriz, for being here. Annelies. Hey, Annelies, good to have you at the table here. Annelies, you are organizing events for Studio Europa Maastricht aimed at facilitating and stimulating debate and dialogue on European affairs. And before you joined Studio Europa as a program editor, you studied at the College of Europe in Natolin and also wrote a column for the Dutch financial newspaper Het Financiële Dagblad, which was called Young Europa, Young Europe. Great to have you at the table today. Annelies, what makes an online event successful?
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for having me. I think it's great if we have the least monologues as possible.
I second that.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, I think we already have a lot of insights in what we will be discussing today, and I'm really looking forward to doing that with you. So before we continue with this conversation at this table, I would like to encourage all our viewers to participate in audience engagement themselves, which is the topic of today's discussion. Please log into slido.com to engage in this discussion. Join with hashtag 767277. I'll repeat, 767277. 277. It's also at the left bottom of the screen, as I can see. And I'll come back to you soon with a question, so stay tuned. In the meantime, I'll turn to our guest here at the table to examine and discuss some practices. Actually, Giuseppe, as head of outreach and governance at Bruegel, we asked you to bring an example of an event that you have organized in the past year, which was the Bruegel annual meetings. Why did you decide to highlight this event? And I think we'll have some pictures in the background in the meantime.
Well, thank you, Job. Indeed, I chose to bring as an example of, let's say, a special event that inspired me personally, but also our organization, specifically the Bruegel annual meetings of 2021, which is this year, so just a few months ago, at the beginning of September, because it was the first event that we organized in a hybrid form after all the restrictions that we've been having here in Brussels and throughout Europe to host an audience in an event. We've been experimenting different things during the past 2 years, and it was really the moment where we could put together all the experiences that we had in organizing an online event, but as well all the enthusiasm of being back, it's kind of back to school kind of feeling. It was the 1st of September, and we had a lot of people from the policy circles here in Brussels finally meeting again. So there was this kind of sense of novelty on the spot. Plus there was the sense of success in order to organize a global event, because thanks to the digital technology, we could reach out to speakers and audience across the globe.
That really speaks from the pictures as I see them. And I think it is a very nice example of how you combine the digital world as well as the physical experience. Is that also something that made it you find it particularly strong, or what is something that you would really like to highlight? You already mentioned several elements, but what is something that really worked out well? You're planning such an event in advance, and you have your expectations, but what was something that really was like, wow, glad we did this?
I think that the element which was really the new thing we're going to work on when it comes to this new hybrid format is not so much the technological aspect, even though the technical aspect is very important and we're going to discuss about, but it's really how we can design an event that can serve both the audience, which is watching the event from far away, as well as giving a tailored experience for the people that come. It's not the first time we live stream an event. Before the pandemic, we used to live stream events, but the way we were live streaming was simply just put a camera into something that was designed completely just for an audience which was on the spot. Now we had to think on a double way. It was organizing a completely digital event, as we've been doing during the pandemic so far, but also it was organize a special tailored experience for the people that had the chance to come on the spot. And I think this is going to be one of the lessons learned that we are going to come back in the next few months when we are going to look into the future.
Amazing. Thank you very much for presenting this case study. I will happily refer back to it later in this conversation. Thank you, Giuseppe. I would like to turn to Annelies. Hi, Annelies. You have organized on behalf of Studio Europa Maastricht, the Workplace Europe. Could you maybe take us a bit through this event, and why did you decide to highlight this event in the first place?
Yeah. So I chose the event Workplace Europe Mind the Gap that we organized on the 1st of July earlier this year. And I chose it because it's an event that we also organized offline in the year before. And it's a format that really aims at interaction with the audience and the participants. And it worked really well. Offline, but this time we organized it online, and with a few adjustments, it also worked really well online. I want to show that offline formats can also work online with a little bit of adjustments.
Yeah, we can see that in the pictures indeed. And what did you find particularly strong about this event compared to some other programs you have tried the past year?
Yeah, I think it's a threefold answer. So the participants were highly engaged, also because of our preparation. If we go back to the previous slide, yeah, you see that the people already in advance were really invited to have a look at the lobby where they could introduce themselves to the other participants participating in the workplace. The agenda was there was some reading material. So we really tried to engage the participants prior to the event to make sure that the turnout was as high as possible. And then really the engagement was all about giving the participants agency during the event, so they could co-create the agenda of the event. They could participate in polls. They were really, how do you say, motivated by the chairs that we briefed in advance for the breakout sessions. So that was really interesting, and the reporting was also really extensive. So if we go to the second or the third slide
with the sketch.
Yeah, the illustration. So we had a reporting, extensive reporting in words, but also in illustrations. So we had an illustrator present for the 4 hours, and he made this great illustration of all the outcomes of the event. So
yeah, well, thank you. And well, maybe it's a question then to ask, like, if you want to organize this yourself, what should you bear in mind then?
Yeah, I think for such events, it's really important to invest in a good studio, a good moderator, really try not to do it all yourself, but also really work well on an agenda and really share the agenda of the event prior to the event so that people know what they can expect and can prepare for the event. Yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Annelies. I see some of you nodding, also listening to Annelies. So I think we'll find a lot of common ground. But I'm also curious to your specific personal experience when we start looking back. We have entered that stage of the discussion now. So we're going to look back at your experience of the past year with online and hybrid events, and specifically regarding audience engagement, because I would like to highlight that today. For the people at home, if you would like to engage in this discussion too, please share your thoughts on slido.com, and we'll have a look at your responses soon and also try to incorporate them in the discussion as we go. Giuseppe, when I hear about your job, it sounds like you have the best job in the world, at least very amazing, and you're head of outreach and head of governance and all of this. But what changed in your job when events started to move online? Was this something that you, a bit of an existential crisis, or can you tell me or walk me through that a bit?
So when the lockdown started, we were quite fast in React, I have to say. So our job changed almost overnight, I have to say. The good thing I mentioned before, we were already used to do live stream. We were actually already using Zoom before Zoom became a household name.
Wow.
So we had already a couple of years experience in using that technology, which made us really fast in really from one day to another, just switch from the office to home. And that made the first part of the lockdown, let's say, very exciting moment, because first of all, we had the capacity to organize ourselves very quickly because we had the technical skills and in-house technology already. But secondly, we had this bunch of audience which actually was just waiting for
something to happen.
For something to happen at the beginning of the pandemic. That's much before the Zoom fatigue that we experienced all at a later stage. And thirdly, we had a certain thirst in the analysis of what was going on. And given the fact that Bruegel is providing analysis on the economic impact of the pandemic, we were ahead of the rest of the conversation in order to engage with policymakers, especially with commissioner level at the European Commission or at the ministerial level, member states, or engaging with the private sector, and really start to discuss what we should do in that specific situation that we were in. So it was quite exciting. It changed overnight. It made the work more interesting. But I also have the impression that everyone was very excited the first 2 weeks of the pandemic. Then when we realized that this was not like a month of, new experimentation and then back home, then things, let's say on the long run, started to get a little bit more complicated for everyone. I suppose that we can share more on this.
Yeah, but if short follow-up question, if you would have to outline your tasks prior to COVID and after COVID, do you really think you are in a different job now?
I can speak about the overall events organization team, not just me personally as my personal job. The job changed a lot because we had to switch a lot of people when it comes to engagement and audience, taking care of the audience from basically the classic welcoming the people, reception, ensuring that they get sandwiches and beverages when they arrive, to let's get out there, let's engage people on new means like Slido that we are using in this conversation today. Let's live tweet more so that people can enjoy and get what's going on over there. So it was much more outreach and much more external from this point of view. And then the numbers paid in the sense that we got multiplied by a factor of, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 the number of people, or even more for some events. So before we were having live stream, we were having like 200 people max joining the live stream. But then we were having thousands of people joining the live stream all of a sudden. So that changed completely the scope.
I understand. Well, that's already touching upon a bit of the opportunities to be seized. We'll get back to that later. Thank you, Giuseppe. Annelies, for you, how did things change at Studio Europa? Is there some things that you can resonate with listening to Giuseppe?
Yeah, well, I think we were less advanced in using online tools such as Zoom, compared to Bruegel. So we did some recordings of events, but was more for archiving than any communication effort. And our aim at Studio Europa Maastricht is, of course, engaging local audiences from all walks of life in the conversation on European cooperation. And so, we could not go on the streets anymore. So we had to rethink our strategy in that sense. So both our communication around events, but also the formats of our events. And we have a few concrete examples. So if we go to the following slide. We, for example, in 2019 organized the Maastricht Europe Days. There was a festival of like more than 30 events everywhere in the city, and we also want to organize this in 2020. But then, of course, that could not happen. And then we decided to organize or develop a virtual street that was called Boulevard Europa, and you can see it on the pictures. That was one of the adaptations in our programming. But for example, also we have another format that it's called Sketch of Europe, and basically we take a cartoon drawn by a cartoonist from Limburg to the streets, and the cartoon is on a European topic. And we film the reactions of the people on the street on the cartoon. So we found other ways of engaging people, local audiences on European affairs. So you were encouraged to be more creative and to think out of the box. That's indeed also, looking back, I can imagine one of the things that you take away from there. Beatriz, you've been a broadcast journalist, writing for different newspapers, and then pandemic hits, and you have also been moderating events. Do you feel there was an extra demand suddenly for moderators that could actually be in front of a screen, present, and engage in a discussion that was fully online and
Could you maybe walk us through also how your job changed in that sense?
Yeah, I do. I think that there was a need to have, first of all, professional moderators because you wanted to be more engaging and you wanted to have someone who was able to do the job. And then also there was a need for people who were used to do broadcasting journalism because you needed someone who was able to be very comfortable in front of the camera, who didn't needed really an audience to get the energy, but they wouldn't have the energy in themselves. And so for me, it meant that I had way more the amount of moderations that I would have ever had.
Yeah.
Because I had that kind of experience, and that's a completely different way of shaping things that they used to do. So they didn't only require me to just show up there and moderate the event. They wanted me to help them shape the event itself because they wanted it to look like a TV show. And for that, you need someone who has experience in doing that in the real world. And that's why it resonated quite a lot what Giuseppe was saying before, because live stream events have always been there. But the difference was that now we were aware of that live audience and we wanted to shape the events in a way that would make sense for those who were following live. And I was thinking about my own experience as you were asking to both Annelies and Giuseppe about the events that they remember being the most successful in that sense. And I thought about the launch event of the Climate Pact that was organized by the European Commission. It was probably one of the biggest gigs that I got during the pandemic, and it was in December last year, which meant people were already tired of following live events and they wanted to have something a little bit different, a little bit more fresh, also because it was intended to raise awareness among young people. So you want them to feel that it's something fun, but also that they are actually heard. And what it was interesting about this event is that it worked like a TV show in that the audience targeted was an agreed audience. So you would reach out to the young population, but organizations who are already active in the field of climate change, to people who already have projects, who have somehow showed interest in the pact that was being launched that day. And then those were the people who were actively live engaging with the Executive Vice President for the European Green Deal, Frans Timmermans. They were there live with their video camera on, just having a conversation with them. So it was not just questions being sent via Slido, which was one of the tools that we use, but it was more an actual conversation with people who were live there, the same way that you would have organized something physically, but because you have to prepare it technically in advance, you needed to reach out to them before.
So within the matter of a few months, you also evolved in online audience engagement and also in learning through that. So that sounds very inspiring and interesting as well. And do you feel that your role as a moderator also changes? Is it different type of questions, a different posture? Is it also in the way you would go about structuring a discussion?
Well, again, I think it would very much depend on the kind of event that I would be moderating. I had a little bit of everything. I had like really regular panel sessions online where there was no really so much work into the shape of the event, but just simply having a conversation. And there, obviously, you want to be a little bit more straightforward because you need for people not to get bored about it. But then in the end, those events, I think it served more as a podcast because it's people are listening to them, but they're definitely not engaging with them because they're not really part of the conversation. Right. But I did have a change in that I used to do moderations in person, but only with very small audiences. And suddenly I was brought into a stage, like literally a stage where I would reach out to thousands of people across Europe because suddenly we could actually go beyond those borders of a simple building, right? So the way in which you would shape the conversation would also take into account that you're no longer talking only to Eurocrats, to people who are part of the bubble. You're suddenly talking to way more people all across Europe in different places with different backgrounds, and obviously you have to take that into consideration when you're shaping your event.
Thank you, Beatriz. I think that you highlight a lot of different things, and I also see that we're slowly but surely also starting to see that we're looking back, but also are still in the present. A lot of things doing the way we do, right, from the past year, and also kind of that there has been a very steep learning curve in that regard. Angel, I would like to turn to you. Hey, Angel. You worked for DJ Regio at the time when the pandemic broke out. So we travel back in time. And then you're in a position where you have been doing the ways you did already for a period of time, of course. And then the pandemic struck. So how did it restrict your work at DJ Regio? And do you feel that you were able to reach more or less people after the pandemic struck?
Yeah, it was actually not so long ago, but it feels like it was ages since the moment when we heard about and we experienced actually the first lockdown. I think in terms of experience, in terms of the changes, of course the initial impact was mostly on the internal organization, also in big institutions like, for instance, the European Commission, in particular the Director General for which I work. That I think we were very well prepared to switch to the so-called new normal. It took a bit more time to realize the potential of communication towards the external stakeholders in the external world. This is, I think, this was the big advantage of the if we can talk about advantages of the pandemic.
Why not?
Because first of all, the big psychological contradiction of the pandemic was that it introduced the social distancing, but it made people understand how, let's say, connected and how that we need constantly to experience this community feeling.
Yeah.
And it was very much the case, and it was very much highlighted by the experience of the pandemic. At the same time, as Beatriz and also Giuseppe were pointing out, the new digital tools and the new digital communication offered lots of opportunities to go out of a single room and basically enter into the houses of the people who are listening to an event or to or a conference, and so giving the possibility also for a bigger reach out, and changed very much the role of the audience itself, because from let's say passive listeners, participants, and listeners to speeches and presentations, actually the audience became part of the dialogue, of the communication. When I was, let's say, the last months of my work with DG Regio was that we were trying to, before I joined the Secretariat, we introduced indeed this element of citizen participation in the policy we are dealing with. We are dealing with so cohesion policy, and I remember that one of the last in-person events, big in-person events of organized by the Commission, was actually a conference about citizen participation in cohesion policy. It was end of February 2020, and it was a huge event. Out of which we wanted to introduce, this new strand of citizen participation, and immediately after the pandemic came, we were a bit, let's say, puzzled or confused about how to proceed, because there were some pilot projects that we were initiating, we were starting with civil society organizations, etc. And actually, the pandemic and the digital communication and engagement with the people allowed to ensure a wider let's say a wider diffusion of the information, and almost real-time exchange of best practice, which was, by the way, very much functional to the project itself. And this is also with what we are realizing with the conference on the future of Europe now, because, as you know, it was postponed due to the pandemic.
Definitely,
but it was also strengthened in a way. This idea of opening a transnational, multilingual, democratic bottom-up dialogue was made possible also thanks to the let's say, to these innovative tools that we discovered during the pandemic.
Exactly. So not only a barrier, but also a facilitator in some way. Thank you, Angel. I see that we're a little bit struggling where to look sometimes. So I'm just going to solve that by saying the following. Every time we engage with the audience through Slido, we look at the screen, so to say. We just look at you. When we're in conversation with each other, I feel like let's just look at each other at the table. And I think we'll also, our audiences at home will understand that's the way it works.
The struggle of the language.
Exactly. So let's just resolve it this way. Also, because I would like to engage you a bit with each other, and every time we're talking with each other's to each other's backs, that's not really helping there. Interaction with the audience through Slido. That's what we're gonna do now, and I would like to ask the people at home to further submit their suggestions and their thoughts. Let's have a look. Which challenges do you see, and which challenge have you experienced during the pandemic? Let's see if we can go there. There you go. And what have you learned from them? Let's see. Let me see. As a producer, balancing high production values with interactivity, of course. Yeah, I think this was also already highlighted by several of you. And then there's quite a long text. So let's see if we can highlight some of them. Yeah, helping others understand how to move into online interactions and embrace online spaces. Change is difficult sometimes. Yeah, but I think at least it seemed that you guys were quite quick in adapting. At least it's a story you told us, but there were also some challenges here and there. But I see also that some people really struggled with that. I don't know if I could have it one time on the big screen again to see kind of the conclusion that this person reached in the text. Yeah. You have to meet people where they are and work together to find formats that work for everyone. I learned to be more patient with others. Well, I would like to bring that up as we talk with lessons learned, patience, and also maybe giving yourself some time to adapt, right? I can imagine that when the pandemic struck, this was something that we immediately had to do something about it. But we also have to maybe allow ourselves some time to learn lessons and to kind of adapt to the situation. I would like to ask people at home to already think about the following question, which is shown to them, which is also already about the opportunities. So we'll get back to that in a bit. In the meantime, I'll be discussing with our guest here, the lessons learned. So Giuseppe and Annelies, for the both of you, and maybe I can start with Annelies this time. What are the main challenges that you were faced with as an event organizer? You already touched upon some of them, but what is really a lesson learned for you?
Well, I think what's really interesting was what the participant added in Slido, because I do think it is a consideration you have to make for every event. Is this a production that I want to broadcast later on, or is it the event really aimed at interaction between the participants? For example, this event is more meant for production afterwards, and you see that the people are engaging via Slido, and that's not necessarily by opening up their camera and their microphones. So that's to reach a higher production quality, basically. And I think the other lessons learned, also drawing on what has been said via Slido, is that not everyone is as tech literate as we are. And I had that for one of the events, like one of the speakers just barely knew how to put on her camera, so let alone how the functionalities of Zoom worked. And I think you really have to take that into account. And that also means that we are also not reaching out to audiences that are audience that we don't reach out to because they can't, because they're not tech literate.
As a result of it. Yeah. So that's also a bit of a downside of it, I would say.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Giuseppe, well, you already walked us through kind of how you started to adapt and also kind of evolving your job, so to say. What stands out as a lessons learned for you?
Well, pretty much similar to Annelies' lessons learned when it comes to production and technicalities. I would like especially to reflect on the audience perspective, because I think this is what comes from the comment from Slido, what you just said. I think that there is much more attention to the end users than we used to do before. Before, we thought that it was enough to just put 4 people in a panel, and that these people, sometimes even how the panel was formed and how the conversation was moderated was almost a no-brainer. I mean, you just mentioned about all of a sudden everyone wanted a professional moderator because everyone was doing events, but no one was really paying attention to the needs that they are for actually making an event bearable for the rest of the world.
Absolutely.
If I might be very brutal on the way we've been doing things before. So I think this is a very good lessons learned, because now we are at least asking ourselves the question, is this going to be more of an internal discussion for a smaller group of people and we want to engage them, as Annalise said, in a Zoom call, and so it's more like a webinar, like more a seminar kind of style? Is this more about like a TV show broadcasting for a wider audience? Is this more of an explainer, so like more close to let's say a podcast format, but is like a live recorded? So we are broadening up our palette of formats. I think this is what is the big lesson learned.
I think it has raised questions, and maybe Angel knows a little bit more about that, but my experience has been as well, particularly when working with European institutions, is that suddenly the way the events were conceived completely changed, because often some of the events that we have in Brussels are actually meant for networking. So you were targeting particularly stakeholders, people from organizations. You wanted them to meet in a place, to hang out around a glass of wine, and then the event was kind of an excuse. And then suddenly you cannot put together those people in a room. They're definitely not going to be engaging on a Zoom call because I have tons of them. And then you decide to go a little bit further away and move into citizens. And now you cannot back down from there. You cannot involve those people in the conversation and now say, you know what, we're going back to normal, so you're out of the question. So I think it's going to be an interesting process within the institutions as well, to think what kind of events do we want and what is the target audience that we have.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect bridge, a cue also for you, Angel.
Picking up on what Beatriz just said, indeed, now communicating and all from the point of view of the institutions has become more and more about engaging with the audience and with citizens in particular. So this is one of the, I think, of the main achievements that we have experienced until now. There is an important challenge, which is, of course, that it is true for both offline and online events, is communication. So reaching out really to the people with whom you would like to engage and to involve in your process, in your discussion, in your debate. This is particularly relevant for the Conference on the Future of Europe, because, as you know, it's a wide exercise. It lasts almost a year, and it has as objective to involve as much as possible the European citizens from all, as we say, from all walks of life, from all corners of the European Union. This is, I think, an important challenge, and it necessitates not only from, let's say, having the good infrastructure to involve with people, but also to accompany it with the right communication, the right mix of communication and outreach activities, to involve with, to engage with the civil society in our particular case, with different levels of institutions, local, especially the local level, local regional level. They're very relevant, because people need to understand that there is an opportunity, and they have to then to act upon it. Another element which we discovered in the context of the Conference of the Future of Europe, of course, is, and this is, I think, one of the most relevant for this scale of initiatives, is the diversity. Because we are talking here we are speaking English. We are we are interacting with audience who understand English, but this is not always the case. And especially if we are trying to expand our horizon in citizen engagement, this is a very important angle to take into consideration. And this is indeed something that the Conference on the Future of Europe is actively trying to pursue. You know that we have created this multilingual digital platform where you can interact, but you can also interact in your own language, and see what the others put there immediately, translated into all the European languages. So this is a really, it's not only about civic tech, but it's also about a multilingual civic tech. This is the first time that we have some
So not
civic-
only different formats, but also different audiences,
Exactly.
different conversations, I feel.
Exactly, and also in terms of diversity and possibility to use and to communicate. The European citizens panels that are taking place right now, they're a specific kind of event. Of course, deliberative processes, they're not, well, let's say, in order to be effective, they have to be as much as possible in presence, because it's always when people deliberate in these specific terms, it's important to interact sitting around the table or in the same room. But of course, we have to use as much as possible the digital technologies. And digital technologies in this case are particularly useful for ensuring this kind of diversity, because we can provide interpretation thanks to the digital dimension, this technological revolution, which was made possible by the pandemic.
Point taken, and I feel that a lot of lessons have been learned, but we're still learning a lot. I would be very curious to see what our participants, our audience have submitted in the meantime concerning the opportunities. Which opportunities have you seen and have you experienced? Let's have a look. There you go. Could we maybe have it slightly bigger so we can all read it? Yeah, it's a very long table today. Let me see. I find that some event formats really generated much deeper and relevant discussions, especially in smaller groups, allowing the audience to co-create topics for discussion and then freely move between breakout rooms to contribute where possible and necessary, facilitated rich discussion. A breakout room is also almost a new concept, right? 2 years ago, we would have no clue what that was about. And it's definitely maybe an added feature, so to say, to the realm of event organizing, especially online. The possibilities to reach participants that normally would not be able to come to a physical event. That's also, I think, when we're talking about diversity, right, Angel, and also Beatriz, you really highlighted that. Thank you so much for your responses. So if we're talking about opportunities, and I would like to take it a bit away from here, I would say. Before I will bring it to the discussion again, this conversation about opportunities, I would also like to ask the audience again, up to you guys, to submit questions for the panelists. You have been listening to us, and I can imagine that you have your own questions, your own thoughts you would like to share with our wonderful guests today. So that's your opportunity to raise them. So please do so. Well, like I said earlier, and tried to summarize a bit the lessons learned, not only different formats, different audiences, different topics, maybe also different questions, definitely different answers, probably. Giuseppe and Annelies, what are the opportunities of online events in your outreach activities? Maybe I can start with Giuseppe this time. You have been talking also about maybe we should think about live podcasting and all these different online formats. Are we going towards more of these blend hybrid formats?
Well, definitely, yes. I would say we're going at least to have 3 kinds of macro events, which, you have the hybrid events, which is going to be the combination with all the challenges that I was discussing at the beginning of a live event with a specific targeted experience for the people coming on in person, and not forgetting who is looking, watching and participating remotely. So the 2 things. I don't think that completely online events will completely disappear, because for certain things, actually, we are going to see more and more people saying, well, look, I want to have a panel with someone based in New York, another one based in Singapore, and another one based in Brussels. Well, there's very, very, very little justification nowadays to fly these people in. And also there's very little justification for an audience to come and just have a moderator in the room and 2 screens over there. They'd rather be home. So I think that everyone would be more happy if it's more like a very well produced online event. So we are not going to get rid of online events. We are definitely going to experiment more on hybrid, but I think hybrid is going to be just one of, and then we are not going to get rid of in-person events, which will be probably more offline than before. So before we were tendentially just recording these events and putting them online. What we will more and more do is for offline events, trying to find ways for those events to really get an added value for the people that came all the way to that room, which is at the moment, demanding a certain effort from people, because now they got used to the fact that they don't need to go physically to
Could you give an example of that? What is the added value you can actually offer to people?
I mean, we were discussing before. I mean, it's networking. First of all, I mean that's the main thing, and secondly, I would say, especially in the realm of advocacy, lobbying, and policy influencing in Brussels, it's also to have frank discussions which are not recorded. Which doesn't mean discussions which are secret, but being spontaneous. Which before it was done over a coffee, but nowadays, if the event can be finally, we can take away this glossiness that we used to have in terms of protocol and all these kind of things. This we can leave it to the TV show format, or to the hybrid to a certain extent, or the ceremonial more kind of event. But when it comes to substance, we can have some smaller scale event. Not necessarily they need to be completely offline. It's possible that few people might join remotely as well, but in a more like private kind of setting. I think that these three things, then you can combine these things in many ways, but these three things would be some sort of building blocks of what we are going to see.
Annelies, is that something you recognize, these three building blocks, or do you see other forms or combinations of these?
Well, I would also like to add that I think live events will continue to exist also for events where participants with diverging views on highly political issues are gathered. So, for example, on migration, you want to organize an event between maybe right-wing voters and more progressive voters, then it's best to do that in a real life event, because you need to have that empathy connection being created in a room, and it's very hard to reach online over the screen. And yeah, in terms of live streams, I think we will opt for a live stream only when there's interaction with the audience at home. I don't think just live streaming an event with audience in at the venue makes any sense. Then we'll prefer choosing to broadcast it later when we have done like the finishing touches, so to create a nicer viewer experience. So that's my what I see.
Your take on it. And then, well, Beatriz, it requires some creativity these days to come up with an eventful format, and also something that appeals for the audiences, because there's so much out there, right? So it requires a lot of creativity, a lot of critical thinking as well. In your experience, and how do you achieve that? And also, how do you convince institutions or organizations you work for that they should adopt this creativity and also allow for this? To be honest, the Brussels institutions have not always been the most progressive ones in adopting innovative formats in that way.
That is a challenge. Obviously, convincing people to think out of the box and trying to do something different. I think there was an understanding that they needed to do something different from what they've done before, because they knew that people were getting tired of having panel sessions, and particularly when you have discussions around topics where you need to engage with young people, then you absolutely need to do something different. And there I saw a lot of willingness to sit down and think about the way we can shape the event in a way that it doesn't really look like an event. And there it was fully shaped in a way that it was more like a TV show. Like honestly, two or three of the events that I've done were basically me presenting like I would do for a TV, and then interviewing people live, or giving the moment for a video, or then having a discussion with someone doing a short interview on the spot, and then having interactions with the public who are just participating live. But even like I did this event with the commission about it was called Pollinator Park. It's this park that it's meant to raise awareness about what could happen to the world if pollinators would disappear, and it was fully like just a bunch of very interesting people with completely different backgrounds sitting down with me and having conversations, and those conversations were very much prepared. We were trying to see where were the most interesting things that they had to say, where was the human touch that would catch the attention of the people. So you think a little bit not so much about policy and about the official position of the commission, like you try to actually talk to people and engage with them in a completely different way. There are obviously some resistance in other DGs because it's not always the case. Some people are really used to having a very serious format. And then I think it very much depends on your speakers as well. Because when you have super high level speakers, you cannot come up with a crazy format because they might not feel very comfortable about it. But then when you have like medium and high level speakers who are more comfortable with the TV and that are more willing to engage with you as well, that makes it way easier. And there are some high level people who are very much looking forward to these kind of things where they shake a little bit the thing, right? But that's for me the challenge, to actually try to get the message through and make people understand that if we're going to do a full live event that it's not going to have a public, you better do it as engaging as possible, appealing to people's feelings and ideas so that they feel that they are part of the conversation, but also it's just fun to watch. Otherwise, you better do it in present and then have people asking questions like regular times.
So many opportunities lie still there to be seized, and I'm really happy to see that you're so eager to do so. So there will be a lot of nice future events coming from your side for all of you, I think. Maybe Angel then. We have been touching upon a bit. It's not all institution bashing that we're doing here, not at all. But I think we have been discussing a bit about this rigidness sometimes experienced within EU institutions when it comes to event formatting. And also audience engagement and all of that. So when we're talking about opportunities to be seized, you already mentioned a lot of lessons have been learned, but what are still things where you think that a lot of progress can be made?
Well, I would probably single out two opportunities.
Okay.
One is the let's say reinventing the content. Indeed, it was mentioned on several occasions during our debate today. And this is, I think, one of the field that would further develop, certainly, but we have already seen quite a lot happening. The fact that we are also hosted by the European, the EU Week of Regions and Cities shows it very, very clearly, because we have thousands of events and all of them of different format, by the way, with different content, possibility to combine also content with like video clips, live sessions, etc., etc. So it was, I think this is one of the fields that will continue exploring actively and would allow also to the institutional communication to change and to improve, certainly.
So secondly,
it's about participation. I would like to come back to the key word here, because it's about it. We were talking about engagement, of course, engaging opportunities, but it's also about participation by the citizens themselves. And I think I see the opportunity. We see now the opportunity also with the Conference of the Future of Europe of basically reinventing or enforcing the democracy also itself. So the offering the possibility to citizens to be associated as close as possible to policies, for instance, when they look at what is happening in their own town, their own city, what kind of let's say projects are financed, to have a say on them, to monitor how they are implemented, but also in a wider context to have a say on future choices, like, for instance, the opportunity that they're having now with the Conference of the Future of Europe. So digital engaging through digital technologies and digital events gives this opportunity to enlarge the scope, and also to make, let's say, to reinforce our democracy. And of course, it won't be entirely substituted by digital participation. All of us agree about the fact that there will be, of course, certainly combination. The two offline and online will continue to exist together, but they will, I think, thanks to what we have experienced over the past 2 years, they will mutually reinforce themselves.
Okay, thank you, Angel. Well, that brings us to the point where I would like to turn to the questions from the audience. Let's see if people have brought up questions, and otherwise I still have a few prepared for the panelists. Well, wonderful. This audience engagement is going well, I would say. Let's see if we can have the questions. There you go. It struck me that as events went online, a lack of audience engagement became a much greater concern. How do we keep up this trend as we go more offline? I would like to look also at our guests. Who would like to answer this question? Who feels comfortable reacting to this? How do you still keep this?
Well, yeah, of course. As I said, it's just very much about remembering that the audience is part of the event. So if this is something that you would like to do, and this is something that for you is an added value to the conversation, if it's meant to be an open conversation, let's make clear to the people who are present in the room that this is just not a panel session with the speakers, but this is just a safe space where we can all talk about these things, and try to make sure that maybe it's not just we reserve 10 minutes for this, but like, I don't know, try to engage with the people during the discussion, and remember that they are there for you as well, and they might have an interesting input for that. But then it also comes back to the question of targeted audiences, right? Yeah. And having a selected people in the room, which is something that I used to do a lot before I started moderating or freelancing when I was at Euractiv. And it was that the people who were in the room for the event were actually selected people who were coming from very concrete industries that had some interest in the conversation that we were having. And there I can assure you that they were very active, that everybody wanted to talk, they wanted to give their feedback, and it made the conversation way more interesting. So
it's audience curation almost, yes, where you really take the audience as a starting point. Annelies, is this also something you try to do at Studio Europa?
Yeah, I think for Workplace Europe, we really saw that we wanted to have an event that was as interactive as possible, and only by putting the event on our socials or on a website would not ensure the quality of the audience. So what we did was really, as you said, curate our audience. So send out personal invitations to 3 different types of audiences that we had in mind. And that really, really benefited the quality of the conversation. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I would like to turn to the second question also, because we have, with an eye on time, I would like to slowly wrap up, but not before we have answered this the second question. Do you think that we will keep the online format instead of going back to the almost solely physical events, for example, more live streams or hybrid events? I think we have touched upon this a bit, but what does it mean for the operations of Bruegel? Is it really that you also see a shift in kind of time investment, but also financial resources, so to say? Do you really see a shift in hiring different people?
Well, where we see a shift is to now at the moment is first of all investing in infrastructure that would allow us to make these hybrid events workable. Yeah. So that's the first investment we are doing at the moment. Like as we speak, my colleagues are having a meeting with the guys that should refit the events room.
Okay.
So literally. Yeah. Secondly, I think that what we are doing at the moment is trying to plan ahead in a way that we take a lesson of how much resources we used to have before the pandemic, how much resources we had to put, or what kind of resources we had to put during the pandemic for organizing the online events. And now it's like trying to do the math. I mean, again, it's like planning for the budget of next year. So, I mean, I'm speaking very, very practical. Yeah. Like, let's try to see both. I mean, for the moment, we don't really know. But at the moment, the forecast is probably we need as many resources as we used to do in order to curate the people that are coming in the room. But we need to keep having the resources we have pulled out during the pandemic in order to keep doing something that is also making sense online. So basically the resources that are being invested on events are going to be either doubled, or either we need to half the number of events in order to keep. But basically, that's the thing. It's like you can't just go back to where you were before, and you cannot keep doing the business as usual as you've been doing, as we've been doing now. So that's the big dilemma that we all are going to face in the next few months.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Angel, I'll turn to you then, because what Giuseppe is saying is also very much fitting for how the Conference on the Future of Europe is organized, but also how it triggers the institutions to rethink its own role and also the way it engages with the audience. Could you briefly kind of explain, do you really think this will have a long-lasting impact in the way the institutions engage with audiences and with citizens in general?
I think definitely so. We are already experiencing that. You can go for to have a look at the platform and to see, especially the events part, all the events organized by different organizations and different institutions, and also by the citizens themselves, because you can also be, you can also decide to bring together your friends and to call it an event to contribute to the discussion. So, and there you really discover that there are so many types of so many different ways of engaging with audiences, not only with audiences like relation between speaker and listener, but also to create really a community afterwards, and also to continue engaging on the platform. So I think definitely there will be an important impact also in terms of moving from or actually making quantity and quality meet. Because we are not only or we will no longer consider only the number of participants or number of clicks as an indicator, but we will also look into much more into the interaction part. So
the quality of the discussion,
the discussion or the debate will produce at the end. So to also to provide feedback to our audiences, of course, of what has happened and where the let's say the conclusions of this event will lead us to.
Thank you.
And this is, I think, one of the main characteristics of the Conference on the Future of Europe as well.
Thank you. Well, there's so many lessons that we have learned today, so many opportunities that we have identified that we can all seize. I hope that also the audience enjoyed the conversation as much as we did, as I did. We'd like to thank our guests for contributing to the discussion. I would like to thank our audience for contributing as well and engaging. It clearly is, apparent that the future is maybe not only digital, but definitely also hybrid, and also somehow physical. So that brings a lot of opportunities for us all. I'm really looking forward to following everything that the guests are working on. Please follow them also on their social media if you would like to stay tuned. Also the host and the organizer of this panel discussion, Studio Europa Maastricht, is an organization you might want to follow. We're working on a lot of exciting events, and we're also, amongst others, involved in the Conference on the Future of Europe, which is coming to Maastricht in January, and the celebrations of the 30th anniversary of the Maastricht Treaty. So a lot of things to stay tuned on. Everyone, thank you so much. Stay engaged, stay tuned, and I wish you a wonderful afternoon.